Indoor track has been one of those things where some people view it as a sort of maintenance era of an athlete's career, where they may not engage in a ton of races and mainly use it to prepare for the outdoor season. This is not to say these athletes don't take indoor track very seriously though, as the overwhelmingly competitive nature of them lends itself to an entertaining show and of course some fast times in the end. Indoor world records on the other hand though, aren't exactly the go-to accolade to possess for a sprinter, and in this case, that still might have been true, but the end result would become one of the most impressive, yet underlooked sprinting records in all of track and field. Let's do a brief history lesson on the indoor 200 meters. The indoor 200 meters is quite the awkward event to run, mainly because instead of running one turn like traditional athletes of the event are used to, you're now completing two as if you were running an outdoor 400, except the turns are much tighter and you're going much faster, making the indoor 200 a tad slower than its outdoor counterpart. While major competitions never hosted the event with the 60 and 400 being the primary sprint staples, it surprisingly did have some presence in the very early 1900s. But not only were these records quite rare, they were hand-timed as well. With electronic timing becoming implemented in the 70s, the indoor 200 became very popular in countries like Germany and Italy. Athletes like Manfred Omer and Karl-Heinz Weizenseele were running in the mid-low 21s, and then by 1982, the first automatically timed sub-21 time was recorded by Erwin Skymehail, the same man who broke 21 under manual timing just a year later. While the event appeared to be much less competitive due to its centralized interest within athletes, the record would still end up falling multiple times a year, notably Ralf Lübke breaking it 4 times in a single year span, and lowering the record by nearly a full half second. Part of the reason for such a drastic drop in the record could be attributed to the growing popularity of banked indoor tracks in the late 70s and early 80s. These tracks are more or less meant to make the strict 200-meter track turns more accessible, as with the implementation of a, let's say, 10-degree bank, this allows athletes with the right amount of speed and form to go around these turns without having to resort to the more frictional nature of a flat indoor track. For those who have a more diligent understanding of physics, here's a diagram that illustrates just how helpful these indoor tracks work, assuming the athletes approach them properly too. After Lübke's streak of dominance and a new record by Stefano Tilly in 1985, the IAAF finally decided to start ratifying indoor track and field records in 1987, and immediately after, a man from a brand new country lowered the record by 1600ths, as France's Bruno-Marie Rose set a new record of 20.36. The record would see its biggest break in decades following this time, but at the same stadium as before, Linford Christie from Great Britain would lower it quite a bit more in 1995 with a time of 20.25. The unfortunate thing about these records, if you couldn't tell by now, is that footage was extremely sparse, but thankfully, one record would be recorded in its entirety, and it happened to be at the same stadium yet again, and it would go on to become one of the most fascinating sprinting records to unfold at an indoor stadium.
Fredericks very quick out of the blocks there. Let's have a look at the gap down the back straight. Fredericks working hard, they're beginning to close up, and Moen's made very little impression on the Namibian at this stage. Round the top bend, Regis is going well. Regis coming back at Moen on this occasion, but look at Frankie Fredericks, way out in front. Watch the clock. Fredericks at the line, smashes the world record, 1992. So few people break 20 seconds outdoors. Fredericks has just run some 3 meters faster than Linford Christie ran last year when he set the world record, or what is now the former world record.
Frank Fredericks from Namibia would become the first man to shatter the 20-second barrier in the indoor 200, lowering the record by 0.33 and clocking in an absurd time of 19.92. To this day, no other man has run under 20 seconds, even with the overwhelming American presence in the event in the last 20 years. So the gap between Fredericks and the rest of the field still remains completely uncontested, and is honestly one of the most underlooked and unique sprinting records in all of track and field. Now, it should be worth noting that most of these times nowadays are from collegiate athletes who are a few years younger due to the indoor 200 not being an international event anymore, but the insane gap between these times still makes Fredericks' record more than impressive enough. Another fun thing to assess is that Fredericks did not have a ton of sub-20 times in general leading up to this record, so the fact that he ran one of his fastest 200-meter times ever on an indoor track makes it all the more special. His outdoor season following this time was his fastest to date too, as he ran 19.68 at the Olympics, losing to Michael Johnson's world record performance, but was able to beat him once to break his multiple meet win streak. Overall, the indoor 200-meter record is a wonderful gem buried in the indoor track and field archives. It was an event that saw very seldom competition and top-level involvement for the longest time. But once the gates opened up, and with records being ratified, it opened the door for Namibia's strongest sprinter to represent his country for decades, and potentially even more decades to come. This is the brief history of the indoor 200-meter record, and thanks for watching. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel, and if you want to see more track and field content like this, come on over and become a patron. Drop a sub and peep the Instagram too. I'll see you all in whatever video I upload next, and take care.